1942.
Okay, I'm signing up tomorrow.
The men were leaving home. And so were the women.
Riveting is real suited to you girls. After training, you'll be using these tools as easily as you would a sewing machine needle at home.
What are you going to want a knife?
We got another patsy.
Look, all you got to say is, listen, you big ape.
You just take a deep breath and you get your confidence back.
Goldie Hawn. Swing shift.
You need a lift?
Oh, fine!
It turned the day around.
Okay.
It turned their world around. It wasn't always easy.
You don't belong here, none of you!
It wasn't always fair. But not only could they take it,
I wish it could be like this forever.
they could dish it out, too.
Listen!
Well, we showed him.
We sure did.
Goldie Hawn, Kurt Russell,
Okay!
Swing Shift.
Hello, hello. I'm Katie, and welcome to RetroMade, your pop culture rewind. Let's continue the exploration of the best of the 80s and 90s and our ultimate Everymen with the romantic drama from 1984 where Kurt met his real-life love. The movie is Swing Shift. And I'm glad to have Craig Cohen back, returning to the show. Craig, thank you so much for being up for joining me again on RetroMade.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you for inviting me back. I had a blast last time we talked.
Good, good. Well, you have a new project. Maybe you should tell us about that.
Oh, yeah, excellent. Yeah, so a couple of months ago, I started a pretty cool podcast, in my opinion, and it's devoted to the films of Brian De Palma, who I consider America's greatest director. But the interesting thing about the show is we don't really spend time talking about an individual movie per se. We talk about a particular scene or sequence or shot from a particular movie. So it's kind of like a real hyper focus. So we're able to talk about the same movies more than once, but also really just go really in depth as to why that scene's important, the artistry behind that scene, and really sort of help argue why De Palma is as great as he is. Yeah, so we've got, I think the 5th episode just came out as we were recording this. And I don't have any plans on stopping. And I know we've talked about hopefully having you on, I guess, at some point.
Yeah, it's really fun. They're nice little bite-sized episodes. And yeah, so is De Palma your favorite?
The more I do the show, the more he is. I have other, I have other favorite filmmakers, but I think, if push came to shove, it's funny. De Palma probably hasn't made my favorite film, but he's my favorite filmmaker.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And what's the show called?
Oh, it's called The G.O.A.T, The G.O.A.T, a Brian De Palma fan podcast. And I will provide you with a handy link that's got everything. So it's got this podcast, my older podcasts,
Perfect.
The crazy music that I put out that nobody listens to, all that fun stuff. So it'll all be in a handy link for people to click on. But yeah, that's another thing I did want to mention with the show is one of my biggest stumbling blocks as a podcaster was doing everything myself. I tend to have that kind of desire when I'm driving a show. So when I was doing Slycast, we do 90-minute to 2-hour episodes, and then I would have to edit those. And I'm pretty meticulous when I edit, so I would be really, really critical. And sometimes it would take weeks, months to edit an episode. So one of the things I did with this podcast is I said, I'm going to have a limit of 15 to 30 minutes per episode, and that'll allow me to manage the podcast and to make sure I'm able to edit things and get it out. And I'm on a every 2-week schedule, and it's been going great.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, the shorter episodes, much easier.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I loved doing those really long form things, but as my work commute has gotten shorter over the years, I've been like, oh, can I find something that I can listen to on the way to work and finish on the way home?
Oh, yeah. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Y-
I mean, and I want to leave options for everybody. There's people that love those 3-hour podcasts. I love listening to them too. But, you know, I realize that there's an audience for, especially in this like sort of TikTok world where like everybody wants short little, you know, bursts. So it's like, it's the length of an episode without, you know, of a TV show without commercials.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I will provide that link in the show notes.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on by opening the time capsule from the time that Swing Shift was released, and that is April of 1984. This is probably, I don't know, like the 33rd or 34th episode, I want to say. So we've covered this season of primetime TV before. So those of you, go check out the Silkwood episode, more on that in a bit too, as well as the Uncommon Valor episode. Both of those we covered the Nielsen rated top shows of the 83 to 84 season, which this was. And so what I'd like to do once we've already covered those is have the guest kind of talk to, in some way, one of the shows that either meant something to them or they remember or have whatever you like. Do you have one that you would like to expand on?
Oh, absolutely. There were actually, I think, 2 on the list.
Well, feel free.
Probably worth mentioning, but one that I'm going to really focus on. I mean, so in April of 1984, I was getting ready to turn 10 years old.
Aww.
So, I mean, it's a pretty easy year for me to sort of remember. I mean, when you can chunk things off, you don't really remember when you're 12, but 10 years old, 1984, a lot going on. Netflix just had a whole category on their homepage of 1984 films. So like, it's, you know, it's kind of been like, you know, a lot of people thinking about 1984 recently. Mm-hmm. I did notice on before we sat down that it was the debut season of the A-Team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which was, you know, for a 10-year-old boy, you know, that hits all the buttons. And it also had really cool, like non-violent action. Like nobody died. Like they would shoot things and things would blow up and cars would crash, but nobody ever died. But the show that I've sort of stuck with me well into adulthood was Magnum P.I. It's funny. I remember, I have a distinct memory of, I don't know if you did this when you were in school, but back when I was in school, they used to make you sell magazine subscriptions.
It was candy for us.
Okay. And you get like silly prizes. I don't even know where the money went. I guess it went to the school for something. And I remember there was one night where I went out and, you know, my dad was like, okay, you know, and this is, you know, when you could go out as a kid and
like door to door,
knock on doors in your neighborhood and not worry about, you know, whatever we worry about in 2024. So I had the edict of, okay, you know, you have to go to these 2 blocks, knock on every door and try and get subscriptions before you can come home. And I remember being like super paranoid about it that night because Magnum P.I. was on that night. It came on at probably 8 o'clock or whatever. So I remember being like super stressful to make sure I like, and as a kid, you're like honest too, you know, like I made sure to stop at every door, do my sales pitch. I don't remember if I got any subscriptions. You know, you probably get like the pity ones that like your aunts or uncles do and things like that. But I do want to say that I'm such a big Magnum fan. I have it here. I'm holding it up for the video viewers. It's a book called Aloha Magnum, and it's written by Larry Minetti, who was on the show. You can see he played Rick.
Oh, that's who he is. Okay.
Yeah. And I got it in the mail a couple of years from him. It's signed by him.
Oh,
and
very nice.
It's like his autobiography, but mainly built around Magnum. And then at the back, there's like an episode guide where he goes down, you know, he goes through each episode. He gives a quick little plot summary and, you know, memories from that episode. But yeah, I mean, again, as a 10-year-old boy, Magnum was just like such a wild concept. First of all, it's in Hawaii, which is like it might as well be another planet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was living in Western Massachusetts at the time, so like Hawaii just didn't compute. And it was, you know, a tall, rugged, handsome man driving sports cars.
Cool car. Yeah.
Yeah. Getting, you know, in adventures every week. And, you know, it just stuck with me. You know, I mean, the A-Team for me didn't really age as well. Like when I try and watch the A-Team as a 50-year-old man, it's kind of goofy. But like Magnum, like every time I come across it, I'll sit there and watch an episode and I'll be like, you know, that still hits. But yeah, so it was cool to see that Magnum was one of the shows we could talk about, and everything from that show. It was also the era where like TV theme songs were like played on the radio and hit Billboard, which is just, it's wild. I mean, like not just Magnum, you know, there was the Miami Vice theme. You know, if you go even earlier in the 70s, you had all of those classic Welcome Back Kotter, you know, like just, or even around 1984, you had Cheers, which was like a big song. The Greatest American Hero, which is probably a show most people don't even think about anymore. But, you know, that song, Believe It or Not, it's just wild. It's wild how, you know, they talk about synergy in advertising, right? But it's wild how subconsciously everything was synergized in 1984. You know, the product placement, the music, everything was delivered together, you know, especially when you roll in TV commercials that aired during the show. So, you know, everything that we needed to digest and consume was delivered to us in that, you know, hour-long or 30-minute long block of a show that we watched. And then when we left the house and got in the car and turned on the radio and listened to, you know, Casey Kasem's American Top 40, we would hear those songs again that would remind us to watch the TV show next week.
Yeah, it's so much more disparate now. And so it makes it seem like a simpler time. But all of these are 40 years old. So 1984 is 40 entire years ago. That seems a little wild too. And that I was a small child, so I don't really remember a lot of the shows, but I do remember talking about them in other episodes because it's so soap opera heavy that I was worried, Craig, that you wouldn't find one that really resonated with you. So I'm glad there was one or two.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that little trip down memory lane.
You're welcome. It's awesome. It's, you know, I tend to not get too sentimental, but I do like traveling back and thinking about those, for lack of a better word, simpler times.
Indeed. Okay, this is going to be a little wild. I want to move on to the Billboard Top 10 from the week that Swing Shift came out, which was April 13th, 1984. It's very 1984. And I don't recognize like a handful of them. So I'm curious. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the number one song is amazing. Kenny Loggins. Do you have any guesses? 1984. What it was? Huge song from a movie.
It was probably
obviously.
like, was it Footloose?
Footloose.
Yeah.
Yep. That was the number
yeah.
one song this week. He was like the king of
movie soundtracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did the Caddyshack, whatever that. I don't even remember what the name of the Caddyshack song was, but then he did the Top Gun song. He did Meet Me Halfway from
Over the Top. Yep.
Yeah, no, he was the go-to movie soundtrack guy for a long time.
Yeah, hit. Number two is Phil Collins with Against All Odds. Take a Look at Me Now. Great song.
Yeah, a movie that I just watched for the first time probably 2 months ago as part of that 1984 collection on Netflix.
Oh, what movie?
Wild movie. Yeah, it's called Against All Odds.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges is in it. It's,
okay.
It's wild movie.
It's unfamiliar to me. Yeah. The number three song is Wild in that there's a very famous, the number three song is Somebody's Watching Me by Rockwell. You know? With the guest vocal by Michael Jackson. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I just remember being like, how did he get Michael Jackson on this track? And he's not even listed. Michael Jackson is uncredited in the song
Do you know the answer?
No.
Oh, okay.
As to why?
So, well, yeah.
Okay.
So Rockwell is the son of Motown Records founder Berry Gordy.
Oh, okay.
So one of the early Nepo babies, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I guess Gordy's, friendship or relationship or whatever, connection he had with Michael Jackson allowed Jackson to come in. And, it's kind of weird. It's like when you see like Bruce Willis in a movie where he doesn't get any credit. Because it's like, if I can't get top billing, I get no billing, but people are going to know it's Bruce Willis. I'm sure Michael Jackson had a similar thing where he was like, I don't need to be listed on the record. Everybody's going to know it's me. Like that kind of thing. That song was everywhere. That video was everywhere. What a song. And it's one of those things where when you have a song like that, you've doomed yourself right out of the gate, because the thing about writing a great song is you're probably never going to write a song that great again.
Unless you're Michael Jackson.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy. I mean, it's something you have to work at. I mean, and, sometimes it's a fluke, and, people have made careers out of flukes.
Indeed.
All right. So we know all three of these songs so far.
Yeah, I know all these. I do know the number 4 song, Hello by Lionel Richie. And I've said on the show before, I'm not a fan, but I do know that song. The number 5 song, no idea. Like, I looked it up and I was like, I've never heard a line, nothing. Like, the Pointer Sisters and the song is Automatic. Have you heard this?
Yeah, I'm sure I did. I mean, the Pointer Sisters have so many other hit songs, though, that, Automatic probably gets lost in the shuffle. They were like big movie soundtrack people, too.
Yeah, that's true. But I had nothing from it was familiar to me. Same with the next song. I am familiar with Culture Club. Yeah. The song is by Culture Club. But the number 6 song was Miss Me Blind, and never heard this. I looked it up and I was like, how have I never heard this on the radio ever?
Yeah, that's not ringing a bell with me. And you know what the other thing is? Like, a lot of times it's like, it might have been big on the radio, but if they didn't make a video for it, you're not going to remember it, because that's like, a lot of the time you were watching like MTV, whereas,
that's true.
A song might be in the top 10 for a couple weeks and then it drops off. Wow, I'm going to have to Google that one when we're done.
And the number 7 song is familiar. It's Here Comes the Rain Again by the Eurythmics.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Eurythmics were such a wild, wild band for me. Annie Lennox just fascinated me. She was one of those, like, truly weird performers. I mean, Boy George was weird, but Boy George was weird in like a fun, campy way. For me, like, Annie Lennox was like serious weird. Like, and certain artists I didn't really start to appreciate until I was older. Another one that's a great example is David Byrne with the Talking Heads. As a kid, the Talking Heads never made any sense to me. He's wearing that big giant suit, another weird dude. And then it just, took age and sort of experience for me to understand like where they were going artistically. But yeah, I mean, Eurythmics, it's one of those things where it's like the songs are so darn good that you understand why they became a success in spite of themselves. They're this weird duo. She's doing this like androgynous thing that's like not as, like I said, not as outlandish as what Boy George did. It was, more subtle, and just talk about having the talent to back up a gimmick. I mean, they definitely did. And Dave Stewart, her companion in that band, is no slouch in his own right. I mean, he was a pretty big record producer around that time as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. But yeah, Eurythmics, I mean, I feel like I only know a couple of songs, but they're really good. It's just very unique.
No, and I admire the hell out of people that are able to break through being weird. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's, as a weird person myself, I think it's just something that I've always sort of connected with and, admire. And in spite of weirdness, or in spite of like being as different as they seem, they were somehow still able to get middle America on board, which is, just wild.
That is a great point. And again, it does seem different now. I mean, there's some weird people, but it's mostly just extremely beautiful people, you know? The Thompson Twins has the number 8 song, and I'm vaguely familiar with it. Hold Me Now. You familiar with that one?
Yeah, that was a big song. That had a big MTV video as well. They're another like weird looking group.
This lineup is very 1984. Everything about it.
Yeah, the 2 guys and the girl. None of them are twins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am not familiar. They've come up on the top 10 on the show before, but in my life, I'm very unfamiliar with the Thompson Twins.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think they ever really got any kind of cultural reassessment. I don't think they were ever recycled for, I think a lot of bands from the 80s that are acknowledged or known now were either super popular, had a huge hit, or popped up in a movie or a TV commercial.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think that's happened for Thompson Twins.
Well, we all know Daryl Hall and John Oates, and they have the number 9 song that I've never heard of in my life. Adult Education.
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah.
It was brand new to me today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's another thing. They had so many hits that like their minor hits get overshadowed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the number 10 song is Van Halen's Jump.
Maxwell, jump, jump. Maxwell, jump. Boy, jump, jump.
And I do know that song, but I hate it. I do not like Van Halen.
Really?
Don't like them.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Oh.
I know. I guess I'm picky with most things, but yeah, because I've said before, I don't like Lionel Richie, don't like Van Halen.
Wow. And it's
not for
like
me.
A firm dislike.
Yeah. Their sound, and I guess I can recognize why people like it. I can see why people like it. It's unique, but I don't appreciate that. It's not for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Van Halen in 1984 was just so big. I mean, the album was called 1984.
Oh, it was?
Yeah. I don't know if you remember the cover. You probably don't because you're not you're not. It was like a little, like a baby with angel's wings smoking a cigarette.
Oh,
like really iconic photography. The Hot for Teacher video was just like them as little kids. MTV helped so many bands sort of give a look to their sound.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to think of what like the 1980s would have been like without MTV.
Vastly different. Yeah, it made and brought back a lot of careers. You know what I think of when I think of Van Halen? Do you remember there was I think the made-for-TV movie was called Murder in New Hampshire, and it starred Helen Hunt. And it was about, the real people are, she plays like a teacher that ends up having a relationship with a teenage boy, and he and his friends killed her husband. Do you know what?
Oh my goodness!
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, that's another thing I have to Google when we're finished.
I've heard it several times, and I apologize. I can't think of the real life names, but they make like a rock video. Again, it's a teacher having an inappropriate sexual relationship with students, but she hangs out with the students, and she has this cool car. I don't know. I want to say a Trans Am or something. Yeah. And her license plate says Van Halen, and she's always listening to Van Halen music, and that's what I think of.
Who was the actress?
Helen Hunt. Helen Hunt played her.
Wow, yeah. I'm gonna have to Google that. That sounds wild.
Listeners, have you seen Murder in New Hampshire with Helen Hunt? Made-for-TV movie. All right, so some news and events before we get into the movie. Some sports. I am not very good with sports, but you might know these. I mean, I know you know the names, but so Kareem Abdul-Jabbar breaks the all-time career scoring record. Who did he break it? So it's 31,419 points. Who did he boot out?
Was it Will Chamberlain?
It was. Very good, Craig. Yeah. That happened in April of 1984. This I did not know. The U.S. Census Bureau at this time, their estimates rank Los Angeles as the second most populated city, displacing Chicago, which held that position since 1890. So up until 1984, Chicago was the second largest U.S. city after New York. And only in 1984 did L.A. take it over. Did you know that?
I did not. And I wonder where Chicago and L.A. are on the list now.
It's still New York, L.A., Chicago is 1, 2, 3.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
But,
so they've grown. Yeah.
But I think Chicago, I want to say either like Houston or Philly are very close behind, and it will probably overtake Chicago.
Philly is such a claustrophobic city.
I've never been.
It's claustrophobic. That's why I like living out in the suburbs in Las Vegas. You know, the suburbs in Las Vegas aren't what you see on TV whenever they do a news report about Las Vegas, you know, but yeah, goodness, you know, when I lived in New Jersey, I used to go into Philadelphia a lot. And every time I drove into Philadelphia, I would get anxiety, just like, oh my God, I have to deal with driving into Philadelphia.
Ooh, no,
parking in Philadelphia.
No, I barely like driving. I don't like driving in any city of a certain size.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, like, not to get too nerdy, but like, if you think about some cities, let's use New York for an example, it's like a pretty logical grid system. Like, even if you don't know where you are, you know, there's streets and there's avenues that cross each other.
Philly's one of the weird
Philadelphia is not like that. It's not and I guess it's because it's such an older city.
Yeah.
That like nobody, like whoever does that, like city planners or whatever, they didn't really put a lot of thought into it. So you can't logically find your way out of somewhere in Philadelphia. Whereas in like New York, you're like, oh, if I stay on Fifth long enough, I'll hit Broadway or whatever. And I mean, you know, like if you're reasonably intelligent enough to sort of understand it, you can work your way out of it. But like, the amount of times that I got lost in Philadelphia prior to having like GPS or cell phones. Oh,
it sounds, I've not been to Philly, but that sounds like Boston, where it's really wonky. And I feel like really old city. I feel like somebody told me it was because they just put the roads where the horse and buggy routes were. And they're just like, well, we'll put a road here now.
Yeah. Boston, by the way, I don't know what your opinion is, but it was like, I haven't been there in a long time, but the time I did go, it was like the cleanest city I'd ever seen.
Oh.
Compared to New York or Philadelphia, but like Boston, I was like, oh, this city's really clean.
But I did not think that it was the cleanest.
Come away thinking it's clean.
No, you know what city I did come away with thinking that is Reykjavik. I've been there twice now, and it's my favorite European city by far now. And talk about clean. That city is clean.
And do you think that's mainly like the inhabitants just really respecting the place they live?
Yeah, their culture is, I mean, it's like that's Nordic mind frame very much. They live there. They appreciate where they live and take care of it. Yeah.
What's the cuisine like?
Well, I'm vegan and, you know, so
it's the same everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I say that just because they have some interesting local foods that we as Americans would consider a little odd.
Whale there?
I didn't really notice it being on the menu, but they have some meats, like horse meat is sort of common. They have some other like lamb. I think there's a lot of lamb and obviously seafood, but it's an extremely progressive city. And so literally every place that I went had multiple vegan options, like an entire, not just, I'll have the French fries or whatever, you know? Yeah. So it's an interesting city in that it's very small, but it has all of everything.
It's got big city energy.
It does. It has all of the amenities is the word I was was lost for of literally New York City. Like it has all the cultural things of a big city. So yeah, now that we've had our little city discussion. So we talked about Footloose. It was actually the #1 song this week, but I think it was later in the month, after 37 weeks, Michael Jackson's album Thriller is finally knocked off as top album by the soundtrack for Footloose in April.
Wow.
So 37 weeks. That's 3/4 of a year, right? More than that.
Yeah, well, 52 weeks,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So my brain is shut down a little bit, or else I'd be doing math in my head.
Oh, math. Katie cannot do math in her head. Absolutely not. Just like I couldn't get out of Philly or Boston without GPS. I have zero sense of direction. None.
It's over 6 months.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, over 6 months.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's the other thing, just the legs things had. And I tell this story all the time, and I'm every time I tell this story, I internally say to myself, I'm becoming that guy that tells the same stories over and over again.
It happens to the best of us.
But when I was a kid living in that same town in Western Massachusetts, the summer that E.T. came out, we didn't have a multiplex yet. So we had a dual screen. It was, I don't know if you remember, just like you'd go in, there'd be a lobby, and then there'd be like to the left, there would be one screen, and to the right would be another theater.
Yeah. Two. Yeah, that was ours too.
So for probably a year and a half, E.T. like had one theater on lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And then every week or two, a new movie would come through. And you'd go see that new movie, and you'd be like, well, it's good knowing that E.T. is right next door, if we want to bail on this movie, because we knew E.T. would deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Just the legs that everything had it's remarkable. And I mean, by no means do I think that's preferable to what we have today. I mean, the one thing I love about living in 2024 is the access to everything. It can be daunting and it can be overwhelming, but I love it. I mean, I love being able to know that if I'm thinking about a movie that I want to watch, I can either dig it out of my DVD or Blu-ray collection. If I can't do that, I can probably find it streaming somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can't do that, I can pay to rent it on a streamer,
Mm-hmm.
which, even 25 years ago was something you couldn't do. So yeah, and it's one of those things. It's like everything's good and bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it has allowed me to become very lazy. You almost don't need to leave your house if you don't need to or want to nowadays. Yeah.
I mean, and the other thing that the big argument would be like, there's no quality control anymore because bozos like me can just flood the internet with their music, and every other bozo's flooding the internet with their music or their TV show or their movie or their podcast. So there's no gatekeepers, controlling quality anymore. It's like, as consumers, we have to determine whether something's worth our time. Whereas it used to be like, yeah, these are the 10 songs you're going to listen to this week.
Great point. Yeah, we have to sift through.
There's a lot of noise.
Yeah. It's funny though, because the kind of, I feel like movie-wise, or at least movies that make it to the theater, I feel like in the 80s and the 90s, and it's true because a lot of the movies won't be popular, and I'll say, well, it was number 15 on the list for that month. Meanwhile, some of my favorite movies are like number 30. So there was just a plethora of movies being made that went to the theater in the 80s and 90s. And now it's very rare that there's a movie that I want to go to the theater for. And there's seemingly fewer of them, and then they only stay for a week or two. And
well, yeah, I mean, they never have a chance. And not to tie this back to my Palma podcast, but our last 2 episodes, we were focusing on Scarface,
mm-hmm.
which at the time was a critical and somewhat commercial failure. But 40 years later, it's considered a defining sort of
mm-hmm.
pop culture event where, movies back then had a chance to sort of grow and find an audience. Whereas now, especially in the streaming age, if a movie comes out straight to streaming, odds are it's never going to hit a physical media. So it's never going to end up in a video store or a thrift store where you can, find a used copy of something. So a lot of our newer media is just meant for consumption. And then, okay, what's next?
Yeah, it's
again,
different.
I mean, you've really gotta battle through the noise to find stuff that's worth listening to or watching or anything like that. But at the same time, there's a lot of movies and music that I overlooked when I was younger that I'm now like finding, music from 1976 or movies from, the 70s, which kind of distracts me from staying current as well. And,
Yeah,
one
no,
of
that's a
the
great point.
one of the things that happens as you get older is you tend to like get less and less connected from current pop culture.
It's
And it
funny how that
happens.
happens, huh?
Yeah, and it's just, yeah, and it's wild. All the stuff they say about getting old is true, you know. But the alternative is pretty dire, so.
Hey, I like the positivity. Did you know this? I did not know, but in April of 1984, Joel Cohen, filmmaker, married Frances McDormand.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I totally didn't know
Yeah.
that. And they
Yeah,
are
yeah.
still married.
Yeah. Well, she was in their first movie, Blood Simple, which probably came out.
I never saw that.
Oh my goodness. Wild, low budget.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a nice little Texas crime thriller. And then of course, she I think she like really exploded with Fargo, which
Yeah.
is another Cohen brothers film.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
she's
great to hear that they're still together. Yeah.
Yeah, I always look up for these if people are still married or if not when they got divorced. But I love her. Everything she does is quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she's a great actress. I love her in Almost Famous.
I don't think I've seen Almost Famous.
Oh, cool. Well, if you're a fan, she's got a small role in it, but she plays the star's mother. So
Kate
it's,
Hudson is the star.
Yeah, Kate Hudson's
Okay.
in it. Yeah, it's basically like Cameron Crowe. Goodness, I hate taking us down these roads. But I don't know if you know Cameron Crowe. He's a filmmaker.
Mhm.
He started out as a writer. He actually wrote the book Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which became the movie.
Oh.
And Fast Times at Ridgemont High was actually him undercover in high school as like a 19-year-old guy. Long story short, prior to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, he wrote as a teenager for Rolling Stone magazine. And when he was like 15, went on the road with the Allman Brothers. So Almost Famous is a movie that Cameron Crowe made about his life as a young journalist.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool. I don't know. There was
Yeah.
something about it that kind of turned me off from wanting to see it, and I can't remember what it was now, but
No, it's super cool. If you like music movies, there's a lot of music in it. It's a cool story about a kid kind of finding himself. That's wild. Another cool note is Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the book, has never gone back in print since its initial print run. And Cameron Crowe, he is all good with people finding the book however they can. So it took me a long time scouring the internet before I finally found a copy. But for whatever reason, he just never wanted it reprinted. And, you have to bootleg it, which he's completely fine with. There's tons of interviews with him out there saying, bootleg it, find it however you can.
really
It's
interesting.
a wild book because I don't know if you're how familiar you are with the movie, but
Yeah, very much so.
in the book, the entire ending of the book, they go on like a class field trip to Disney, which of course they couldn't do in the movies, probably just because of, the expense associated with that. So yeah, it's like the book all of a sudden takes this wild turn from the, from the movie where it's like, wow, they're at Disney all of a sudden.
That seems incongruent with the actual movie. Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah. It's an interesting book. It's one, I had a podcast at one time called Big Screen Book Club, where every episode we talked about a book and the movie that it was turned into. And it was on my list of books to do, and I just never got to it. And that was one of the hardest podcasts I ever did because
You got to
in
read a
addition to
book.
you have to read a book, then you have to watch the movie,
Yeah.
and then you have to figure out a way to connect all them. Some of my favorite podcasting episodes, the first episode was actually about a book called Nothing Lasts Forever, which was the basis for Die Hard, and it still remains one of my favorite podcasts. It's a podcast episode of mine that I actually will listen to on occasion, which normally
wow.
after I edit and release a podcast, I'm done. I don't listen to it ever again. But my Nothing Lasts Forever Die Hard episode, I've actually listened to multiple times, and it's something I'm super, super proud of.
Well, I'm going to have to check it out if it's available to listen to somewhere.
It is. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, there are a few bits of sad news in the forms of deaths in April of 1984. I feel like I had totally forgotten that Marvin Gaye was shot by his own father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Domestic dispute in LA in April of 1984. And he was only 44 when he died.
Yeah. It's rough. And it's wild when you watch anybody or listen to anybody doing something prior to their death, and you know that, okay, wow, they had no idea what was coming. And it's so hard to like watch people's performances or listen to their music without somehow reframing it with how their life ended. And like Marvin Gaye, like his music is so beautiful and so uplifting and so positive. And then you sort of like think about how it all ended, and it's just like, oof.
Yeah.
You know, but then you think of, wow, he left the world this amazing gift. So it's just like, oof.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I don't really remember that much as a kid, though. Like, our media cycle was so different back then. Like, we didn't have 24-hour news channels. We didn't have court TV. So it was probably reported on the evening news.
Yeah.
And then the local station in that podunk town I lived in, Massachusetts, wasn't going to cover it beyond that.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like we're on this 24-hour news cycle. So yeah, it's why I don't remember that. I don't remember. I can't say I remember where I was when I learned that Marvin Gaye was.
Well, I didn't even know who Marvin Gaye was in 1980. I mean, I'm during this time, I'm like not yet 3.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like I know he's dead, but I feel like I forgot how he died until doing this. Also, the American landscape photographer and environmentalist Ansel Adams died. He was 82. And
wow.
I didn't realize that he had received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1980.
Oh, wow. So Carter gave him that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's wild. I wouldn't have, if you had asked me if Ansel Adams got to see the 1980s, I would have said absolutely not.
I don't know if I realized that he was an environmentalist. I would be like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it makes sense, obviously. So, when I was talking about lots of movies coming to the theater, and a movie that seemingly now covering them was not a big movie like Swing Shift, it was the number 12 movie in theaters for April, which isn't that bad considering, which we'll get into. But the really popular movies of the time, the number 1 movie in April was Police Academy. Number 2 was Romancing the Stone, one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah.
I adore that movie. And this one I've never seen, Greystoke.
Oh, The Legend of Tarzan, yeah.
Lord of the Apes, yeah. I don't know what that is. Is
Oh,
it a
wow.
cartoon or
No, it's a like super serious drama.
Oh.
And it's the concept that, so Tarzan was living with the apes, and he was found, and he was sort of like reintegrated back into society. And it's that French actor from Highlander, Christopher Lambert. And the other thing about it that I think is notable was Rick Baker did all the ape stuff. I think it's like every time you see an ape, it's like Rick Baker in the suit. Yeah, I'm a big Tarzan guy.
Okay. No, I've literally never even heard of that movie.
Yeah. It's wild. Yeah, it's number 3 you said for the month. Huh? Yeah.
Then the next ones, we have Friday the 13th, the final chapter, 1984.
That's Friday the 13th movie.
Is it? In your opinion? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Another one of my favorite movies of all time, Splash.
Oh, okay. My wife loves that movie.
I love it so much. Footloose, which was released in February, but it is still topping the box office. Then
Much
there's
like the soundtrack, yeah.
Yeah. Never heard of this. Have you heard of Moscow on the Hudson?
Yeah, it's, I believe, a Robin Williams movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He did a lot of like just low key, like dramas that were forgotten once he sort of became like known more for his comedy.
I can see that. Yeah. The other ones, I've not seen these. Hard to Hold, Up the Creed, and Where the Boys Are. Those were the rounding out the top 10 at the box office.
Yeah. None of those are jumping out as movies that I remember seeing.
But yeah, again, like these were, I mean, popular enough to make a fair amount of money. And there's just a lot of movies in the 80s.
Yeah.
All right. Should
it
we
made more money than Swing Shift.
Yeah, a lot more, as we will get into. But shall we get into the movie Swing Shift?
Yeah, it's wild because when you reached out to me about joining you for this episode, and you presented like the list of movies, this one jumped out at me because I didn't remember seeing it. Watching it again, I'm pretty sure I did see it at some point as a kid.
Oh, really?
But the other thing that jumped out to me was it was Jonathan Demme, who a lot of people probably know from like Silence of the Lambs. So those two things right off the bat intrigued me. And then as I Googled it, I was like, oh, this was a disaster.
Yes.
This is like this is like De Palma's Bonfire of the Vanities, but for Jonathan Demme. And then I was like, oh my God, there's a juicy backstory here too. So it's wild because all the history before I sat down to watch the movie, I was expecting like a complete shit show. And then I was like, it's a fine movie.
I agree. I thought it ended quite abruptly, but yeah, we'll get into that.
Well, you know what's funny? We're talking about like how things are now compared to how they were then. Watching this movie, Katie, like I was like, this would be like a perfect Netflix or Amazon Prime series, like 8 episodes or something. Just because the story kind of felt like, with the amount of characters and the amount of story that they had to fit into an hour and 40 minutes, it really felt like it would benefit from being a series.
That's a great point. I can't believe I hadn't seen it. And it, as I mentioned at the top, this is where Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn met, and then they fell in love and moved in together right after this project. And I'm a big fan of Kurt, obviously, and Goldie. But yeah, I don't know. It's very less. I would find it hard to believe that very many people that are going to be listening to this have seen it.
Yeah. And it's got a pretty remarkable supporting cast as well.
Yes, extremely. Well, let's talk about that. So the movie is a PG movie, and it came out April 13th, 1984. As you mentioned,
even though they say the word whore.
And
twice.
And did you see that I saw it because I went back and looked, but Ed Harris's business is briefly shown.
Really? Oh, wow. I know.
It was like a mistake because he's in a towel. Yeah, that's one of the trivia. And so I went back to look, and I was like, oh my God, you can basically just see skin, but
yeah.
Still, yeah. But you had mentioned it's directed by Jonathan Demme, who directed Silence of the Lambs, but also Philadelphia, The Manchurian Candidate, and Married to the Mob.
Yeah, which is a movie me and my wife watched probably within the last 8 months, and it was one of those movies where I was like, they don't make movies like this anymore.
I haven't seen it in probably 30 years.
It's just it's like Swing Shift is also like that. Like when I watched this movie twice for the podcast, and both times I watched it, I was like, this is really not the kind of movie you see made anymore. And it's just wild that like certain genres just disappear.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if it's not a blockbuster or part of an already established
IP,
then it's almost like that is what gets made now. Like a guaranteed payback of your money, because this movie, you guys, did not make money. It cost $15 million. And it made $6.6 million. So that's not great.
Yeah, and it didn't even become like a mainstay on like pay TV either, which is I think how a lot of movies that didn't do well, like a Scarface, just repetition on HBO, kept it in people's minds, where I don't think people were like, seeing Swing Shift on Showtime every other day.
Well, I wonder, I'm curious to get your take because you had mentioned that there's gossipy, or I can't remember the word you used, quite the backstory, and not everyone was happy with the outcome of the movie, or there was some scandal apparently behind the scenes. And I wonder if maybe that's why, because so the writers, Nancy Dowd was the main writer, and she actually went by a pseudonym. She did not want to put her real name on this movie. I can't remember what the pseudonym was.
Ron something, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah, but she was the main writer, and then there were two others. So Nancy Dowd, you guys, she won an Oscar actually for the 1978 movie Coming Home. And she also wrote Slapshot and Ordinary People. Again, Ordinary People is a movie that would never get made now either. Yeah, same. So Bo Goldman was another one of the writers, and he won an Oscar for Melvin and Howard, as well as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which also won a Golden Globe. He was nominated for Scent of a Woman, and he actually won. So he was nominated for an Oscar for Scent of a Woman, but did win the Golden Globe for that. And then Ron Neiswaner, Neiswaner, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. He won an Oscar for Philadelphia, so he must work with Jonathan Demme a fair amount. And then he was nominated for a Golden Globe and an Emmy for the Homeland TV series with Claire Danes, which is excellent. I don't know if you've seen that with Saul. What's the guy? Mandy Patinkin. I love it's great. Yeah, I like his character a lot in that. So those, I mean, that's quite a writing cast. All of those Oscar noms.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to get too into the trouble.
Yeah, go for
aspect of the production right now, but from the limited research I did prior to sitting down, is it seems like at some point this was a movie that was developed. And then Goldie Hawn, as a star and producer, tried to find a way to make it less of an ensemble movie and more of a Goldie Hawn starring vehicle. And that's where Jonathan Demme and the writer, and I believe the editor, all had a problem. Interestingly enough, Demme didn't take his name off the film, but he walked away from it because from what I read, there was like 30 minutes of footage that was written and shot for the film that didn't agree with.
Yep.
Again, to maybe make it more of a singular focus, which it's weird because I didn't really pick that up watching the movie.
Well, I don't know if I would have if I didn't know it, but knowing it as I watched it, I could see. And it also increased the budget too, like shooting that extra footage.
Yeah, an extra 30 minutes of footage.
So that probably didn't help matters. But I think especially knowing that Christine Lahti, who is the third build, and I have a feeling it was more, the finished product was clearly Goldie's the main, and Christine Lahti is a supporting the best friend role. And I have a feeling that wasn't necessarily the case to begin with. And she actually was nominated for an Oscar and a Golden Globe for this movie, which is wild. And she is good in it. I mean, she's very good. So I wonder if she felt a little upstaged or something. I don't know. She was a younger, maybe a little more vain at the time. Goldie, maybe.
Yeah. Hey, it's human. It's human nature, right? To, and especially when you're the star of a movie, like the amount of pressure that's on you. I can't imagine the amount of second guessing that happens.
True.
When like you're tasked with carrying a film, whereas like Goldie Hawn was the star of the film, even if it was an ensemble cast, like Christine Lahti's agent wasn't worried about her finding work after that movie. Whereas it's like, as a leading actress, you're only allowed so many flops before your phone stops ringing, right?
Yeah. So from a cast perspective, we have Goldie Hawn. She plays Kay. And Kurt Russell plays Lucky Lockhart. That sounds like a Stallone name, doesn't it? It's quite a movie name. And then Christine Lahti plays Hazel Zanussi, the neighbor and best friend of Goldie Hawn. I want to come back to her, but I think as I go through the cast, perhaps I should let people know what this is all about so that makes a little more sense. So I have a feeling, you guys, that you've not seen this. If you have, please let me know. But for those of you who maybe it's been 40 years, or if it's new, Swing Shift is set during World War II. The film follows Kay Walsh, a housewife who takes a job at an aircraft factory while her husband is away fighting. As Kay becomes more independent, she develops a romantic relationship with her charming coworker, Lucky Lockhart. The film explores themes of love, infidelity, and the changing roles of women during wartime, highlighting the personal and societal transformations brought about by the war. So that's what Swing Shift is all about. So yeah, those are our three mains. And then, well, so Christine Lahti, I did want to point out, listeners, I recently guested on one of Ryan Rebalkin's new shows. He's doing another director, Ed Zwick. He's got a show about, Ed Zwick's Flicks. And
she was in About Last Night.
No, she was in Leaving Normal.
Oh, okay.
Have you even heard of that?
I haven't. And I listened to the episode about last night. Who played the friend in About Last Night?
That was.
Oh, God.
Oh, man. It's buggy. Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
No, I picture Elizabeth Perkins.
Yes. Elizabeth Perkins.
For a minute in my head, I was like, oh, Christine Lahti was. Because I haven't seen About Last Night in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, when the episode came out, I looked for it and it wasn't streaming. And then I looked again and it looks like it is on Disney Plus now here in the States. So like, I'm going to sit down and watch it. I've been having, so you joined, you're going to be joining Ryan again for another episode, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
awesome.
It was, I think he likes to have women for some of those types of movies. So yeah, Leaving Normal is two women. It often gets compared to Thelma and Louise, but it's not really, but yeah.
But without the downer of an ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm scheduled for, I think, the last movie. Like
he's going in order. Yeah, he's going in chronological order. So I'm front loaded. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I've been enjoying listening to it because I know like a lot of like the key Zwick movies, but I don't really know some of these lesser known ones.
Yeah,
so it's kind of cool.
Same.
Christine Lahti, though.
Yeah, Christine Lahti, but she is, so it's funny because I don't think of her. She's lovely and she's wonderful. She's a brilliant actress, but oddly enough, just recently I'm covering a couple of her movies, but she plays the grandma in the TV series Evil on Netflix. Have you seen that, Craig?
I have not.
It's like a current show, or maybe it recently ended, but she plays the grandma and she has won several awards or had been nominated for Chicago Hope, which I never saw that, but she's really well known for having a main role in that show. And she won an Oscar for a movie that she, I believe, directed and produced. It's a short film called Lieberman in Love from 96.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Yeah. So that's Christine Lahti. And so her love interest in this is Fred Ward.
Yeah.
Who I've talked about him a few times on the show already.
Yeah.
Who's in Silkwood, as well as Uncommon Valor.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And also another 10-year-old movie, a movie for 10-year-old boys. He did a movie called Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins.
Yes, he certainly did.
Yeah, which is wild. And it's a movie that they say certain movies couldn't be made today, and that one couldn't be made because they like literally made a white guy Asian instead of casting an Asian actor.
Oh no. What year was it made? Oh God.
Oh God. 80. It had to be what, like 85, 86.
That
like,
late? Oh geez.
Yeah.
Oh no. Yeah. That's no bueno. But I like Fred Ward. We've talked about it in other episodes that surprisingly he didn't have a bigger career because he has that handsome, rugged look to him. So I don't know. But
yeah, it's just certain actors just never have that breakthrough role, you know, that really sort of takes them to that like next level. And it's hard, you know, it's wild, but like he was working right up until he died though. So there's something to be said for that kind of career as well.
That's true. I think I'd rather have the money and not the fame. I'd rather be able to go live my life and just be a working actor and not be accosted.
Yeah. A lot of people in this movie though are like, it's funny. Like like a lot of times you watch a movie from 40 years ago And a lot of the actors you don't, you can't say, oh, I've seen them in something in the last 5 years.
There's
Whereas,
tons
like,
of people in this.
yeah, like Holly Hunter, Ed Harris, who we talked about already.
No, we didn't actually, but he plays
Oh.
Kay's husband. Ed plays Jack Walsh, Kay's husband, who goes to war. And then Holly Hunter plays Jeannie. She's a coworker at the factory.
Heartbreaking scene. Oh my goodness. What a heartbreaking scene.
When they notify her that her husband died.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's got like kind of a comedic tinge to it, or at least that might have been the intent, but the way she plays it is just so. The second time I watched this movie, like I saw that scene coming up and I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Just oof. Just
Because
great scene.
He comes to the group of women and, as
he doesn't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, who's he coming for? And then the officer who has to do it, he says,
I've never done this before.
Yeah, this is the first time I've done this. Yeah. Yeah.
Oof.
But yeah, you guys all know Holly Hunter. She won an Oscar and a Golden Globe for The Piano. She was nominated for 13. She was in Broadcast News, The Firm, Emmy noms for
Raising Arizona.
Oh, yeah. Saving Grace. I never saw that show, but she was in that show. She also, from 1989, it must have been a TV movie called Roe versus Wade. How prescient. But yes, she had both an Emmy and a Golden Globe nom for her role in that TV movie. Yeah. And
no, I love Holly Hunter.
Yeah. She's, Home for the Holidays is one I can remember her. She's just kind of always, she never comes to mind when I'm thinking of actresses for some reason, but she is a mainstay. So there's several other coworkers. Sudie Bond, who was also in Silkwood. So Fred Ward and Kurt and Sudie Bond were all in Silkwood. Have you seen Silkwood, by the way?
Not probably in over 20 years, so I'll say no.
It's really good, but it's one of those movies that is impossible to find to watch. And actually, now that I'm saying that I got a lot of Silkwood vibes watching this movie. It's very similar. It's it's a threesome, meaning like a boyfriend, girlfriend, and the best friend, always together. They all work together, like a strong bond. And then there's several people from Silkwood in this movie too. But Sudie Bond plays Annie, a coworker. She's the older lady. Patty Maloney plays Laverne, another coworker. And she was the little person.
Oh, okay.
She played Lois Adams in the 1991 Addams Family movie.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Violet, another one of the coworkers who Kay saves from a falling piece of, I don't know, machinery in the factory. Yeah. She's played by Lisa Pelican, and she played the title role in 1978's Jennifer. And she was also in Lionheart with Jean-Claude.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Susan Peretz plays Edith, another one of the coworkers at the factory. And she is probably most known for playing Angie in Dog Day Afternoon.
Oh, great movie.
Yes. And then did you recognize Charles Napier?
Yes. He's a Jonathan Demme mainstay.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah. Famously in Silence of the Lambs, he's the guy whose face Hannibal Lecter wears.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, he was most recognizable to me as playing Murdoch in Rambo 2.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Huh? Yeah.
Yeah. Who he plays is Moon Willis, who is one of the male factory workers that is not too keen on all of these ladies coming to work at the factory. So he's kind of a dick. He's a bully.
Yeah, he's like the de facto villain of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, blink and you'll miss him.
Stephen Tobolowsky.
Well, him, but also Roger Corman, the legendary Roger Corman.
That's right.
Who gave Jonathan Demme his start, like many filmmakers who got their start in the 70s. Roger Corman plays the guy at the very last scene of the movie. They're giving like a press conference.
Mr. McBride, like the factory's owner or CEO or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, wow, that's a young Roger Corman. He was probably what, 50?
I don't know what he looks like. So I knew that. So I was looking for him, but I had no, because he's a behind the scenes guy. I didn't, or does he usually have cameos in his stuff?
Well, I know him just because I've watched a lot of the behind the scenes of the movies that he was involved with. One of my all-time favorite movies is Death Race 2000, which he produced. So, you know, there's like on the original VHS that I have of that, like there's a sit-down interview with him and Leonard Maltin. He was also a guest a bunch on Joe Bob Briggs, who's like a monster host. He does a show called The Last Drive-In. So I'm okay. I knew Roger Corman, but also Roger Corman also had a speaking role in Silence of the Lambs as well. So Jonathan Demme directed him on multiple occasions.
I like that.
Roger Corman is just such a fascinating dude, and God, he was the true epitome of finding a way, you know, like
just tiny budgets.
Just scrapping it, you know, being scrappy and just like constantly, you know, putting stuff out. And, you know, I mean, if you look at like the history of filmmakers that got their start making movies for Roger Corman, it's remarkable. We lost him recently, but man, what an impact. Yeah, he died within the last, I want to say like the last 3 months or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
90 something. He had a great life and a great career, and just few people make the impact that he did. But it was wild because I had to like pause the movie, and I'm like, his voice is so distinctive. I'm like, that's Roger Corman, but I wasn't used to seeing him as a like sort of a younger guy. And I was like, that's Roger Corman. And I was like, I had to Google it. I'm like, Roger Corman, Swing Shift. And sure enough, it came up. But yeah, but just what a stacked cast this movie had. I mean, and it's funny too, because, you know, we talk about this 1984 movie in 2024. And like in 1984, you didn't know who Holly Hunter was.
That's true.
You know, like, you know, also, was Belinda Carlisle in this movie as well from the Go-Go's?
As who?
There's a scene early when they're at the nightclub and there's a singer up on stage, and I didn't go back and look, but I was like, I think that's Belinda Carlisle.
Wow. Good eye. I didn't know what to expect with this movie. Oh, also, I'll just note, the music, there's 3 people listed as doing the music for this movie, and I don't know if you took note of it or not. The music was lovely, but I didn't. Peter Allen, Bruce Langhorne, and Patrick Williams did the music for this movie. And
it's funny, I'm not hearing any theme in my head.
Yeah.
But I thought the movie did a really good job of getting us to understand what the 1940s sounded like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that, you know, all like the horns and like big bandy type things. So again, like no overt like theme from Swing Shift that I picked up on. But the music wasn't distracting, but it's also like something I came away with. It's weird, Katie, because like the movie, it takes place between 1942 and 1941 and 1944, like right when the war ends, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's got like the look of the film too. It's not like super clear. There's not like an extreme clarity to it. I don't know the technical terms behind it, but whatever film stock and lenses they used. And I know the cinematographer on this was like a Japanese guy, Taj something, who is a famous cinematographer if you look him up. But like the thing I really liked about this movie is it had like kind of that like soft look to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things you probably have to see to understand. But it looked like the 1940s to me, like beyond the production design.
Mm-hmm. I think I see what you're saying. It was not like super like crisp and modern.
Yeah. And I think that was probably a stylistic choice between Demme and the cinematographer to be like, you know, let's, you know, granted, there weren't a lot of color films being made in the 40s, but, you know, to sort of like, you know, again, it didn't look like a modern film, which I thought was cool. And I thought it helped sort of lend itself to the period nature of it. I thought overall, like the production design, the costume design was all spot on.
Yeah.
And the other thing I appreciated about it is it wasn't like overtly gimmicky. Like for an example, if somebody's going to make a movie about the 80s now, like it's in your face how 80s it is.
That's a good point.
Whereas here it was like everything was, well, and the other thing is growing up when I did, and probably you caught the tail end of this, is like a lot of the stuff we grew up around was still like probably stuff that was from like the late 40s I remember the desks I sat on at school were like from the 50s. So like,
yeah, I guarantee the ones I had were old.
So a lot of it didn't seem super foreign to me, but at the same time, it didn't seem gimmicky. Again, the costumes didn't seem gimmicky. It all seemed like very tasteful and subtle and not beating you over the head that they were making
You're right.
a 1940s movie. And I really appreciated that. And the other thing I really, really appreciated was I love when movies just get right to it. And the one thing I really loved about this movie was it starts with the day before Pearl Harbor.
Yep.
And you just see a regular like end of the work day for Ed Harris and just how routine it is. And then we cut to the next day and everything changes. And there's even that scene where he tells Goldie that he's going to sign up for the service, and they're in bed that night or whatever. And she's got that scene where she kind of breaks down crying. Like she knows that the world that she is currently living in is going away.
Well, and then they come back to that. They circle back when he comes back. And, again, years have passed over the course of this movie when Ed Harris is off at war and Goldie and Kurt, or I always do this, Kay and Lucky develop a romantic relationship. At first, she tries to say no. But you can tell she's very conflicted because she does like him. Then they fall in love. And then Ed Harris comes back for a couple days on leave, and that's when he finds out because they're celebrating Lucky's birthday. And there's like twice a conversation when he finds out, and it's very civilized, but she's like, I've changed. Things have changed. The world has changed. So yeah.
And then also, she's seen coworkers lose their husband, so, and I'm not going to say I love this movie. I enjoyed it enough to watch it 2 times in less than 24 hours, but there was a lot of stuff I appreciated about it. And I also sort of appreciated how the timeline sort of worked between her and Lucky in terms of he was constantly like,
go out
doing
with me,
what
go out. Yeah.
Yeah. And to see like her finally, get to an emotional place where she was open to that, and then also like instantly sort of regretting it as well, but like knowing that there was a connection there now that would be there forever. And then you get into the whole sort of tail end of the movie where like it almost becomes like she goes to see him and she sees Christine Lottie's character outside. And then that whole relationship as well was amazing too, because when she first gets the job at the factory, she walks by Christine Lottie and she's like, hey, you're my neighbor. And Christine Lottie's like, yeah, you talk shit about me all the time, you and your husband, like I'm supposed to like you now. But then over the course of the movie, they do develop like a genuine friendship. And then things get, weird, as they often do between, when romance is involved. But then the movie ends with them hugging each other and saying, we did it. And there's a message there. I'm not 100% what that message is, but.
Well, it was tied up, the ending, we're jumping all over the place, and that's just the way that it goes. But yeah, so the ending, I was like, oh, it's over, because in the last 5 minutes of the movie, everything is wrapped up with a bow. So yes, the war is over. And the women of the factory, who, by the way, they've all grown immensely as humans. They're like, they didn't know how to do any of this before. They were kind of in their place as mothers and housewives. And now they've all gained this confidence and developed these friendships. And then just overnight, the war is over and they all lose their jobs.
Yeah.
So but then again, I'm like, I don't know, like they're bummed about that. but then they happily go back to their lives. We see, let's see, is it Jeannie? So Hazel and Biscuit, and Fred Ward is Biscuit.
Yeah.
They're married. Jeannie has a new husband. I think that's why they're there. There's a celebration, or I think it's their wedding. Violet is, we see her, she's pregnant with like her second child now. Kay and Jack have made up. And then the final scene is that Hazel and Kay make up, and then the credits rolled. And I just felt like the Lucky character was like a bit of a loose end. They tied everything else up. And
well, he went on tour though, right?
Yeah.
Like he gets a goodbye scene where like he's on the bus. Does he read a letter or something? Or we hear a voiceover or something?
Well, we do, but it was before that we're left, at least I was like, Kay writes him a letter saying that she'll continue to write him, and that her husband's coming home and she's not sure how that's going to go. And that's the letter. It wasn't like a goodbye. I'm glad we had this time. I'll always love you. It wasn't that. It was like kind of left hanging. So I don't know. Something about that rubbed me wrong. I did not like how it ended, how the movie ended.
Yeah. I haven't found it yet, but apparently there's as close as we can get to a Jonathan Demme cut of this film. Apparently, and I didn't have enough time to go down the rabbit hole as far as I could have, but I found a couple of Reddit threads about it where people talked about somebody who took all of the existing footage, I guess, from home video releases, and they cut together what they can guesstimate the Demme cut would have been. So I'm curious how Demme would have ended the movie, and if it would have ended differently, maybe not on such a like an up.
Yeah, I have a feeling that was the case. I can't remember exactly how it was put, but I was reading that it was like a completely different movie from what he had envisioned.
Yeah,
apparently.
I mean, if you think about Jonathan Demme and the films that he made, it didn't feel like a Jonathan Demme movie to me. Like there weren't like a lot of the hallmarks that that I normally think about when it comes to him. And I mean, it's a fine movie. It's competently made. It's, there's nothing at any point where I said there's anything wrong with it. And again, if I hadn't known going in that it was such a shit show and there was so much behind the scenes drama, like I would have come away being like, yeah, it kind of felt movie of the weeky, but it was a fine movie. One other scene I did want to talk about, and you sort of referred to it when they all kind of lose their jobs, but when Ed Harris's character comes back for that quick visit where they're like, it was a super secret, like nobody knew they were coming. But when he finds out, like he goes in the closet and he finds like the lead man jacket or whatever. And he's like, who's the lead man? And she says, well, he's like, do I know them? And she says, you do. And then she says, it's me. And I thought that scene and that conversation was really, I just thought it was a good scene where like when he joined the service, he told her how much money he was going to be sending to her. But then when he finds out she's working, he asks her how much she makes.
Yes, $1.35.
Yeah. And then he asks her about overtime, and they get to questions that she can't answer. But I just thought that was I love scenes where like what's being spoken about isn't the entirety of what's being spoken about, where there's like the subtext there. So Ed Harris was having one conversation with her where he was trying to go deep, and her responses were very like surface level. I just thought it was a really well written and well performed scene. It's one of the scenes that sort of stuck out in my head when especially on the rewatch. Like it was a scene I looked forward to. That.
And then speaking of the subtext, I feel like there was a double meaning when so Lucky, played by Kurt Russell, who is extraordinarily handsome in this. First of all, I love the 40s of it all, the clothes, and there's a scene where he's just got an undershirt with suspenders, and he has short hair, but it's curly on top, and sometimes he wears glasses. He's just very young and beautiful. But when Jack comes home, he does find out that his wife has been having an affair with Lucky, but Lucky also feels this way probably because it's come up a lot. Guys they don't understand why he's not at war. He's a young, seemingly healthy man. And so they think he's being cowardly or cheating.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Ed Harris is talking to Kay about, they're kind of dancing around it. And he's like, why? She's like, well, what would you call it? And he says, I'd call it cheating. And he means cheating in two ways. I really liked that. That as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Lucky has a heart condition apparently, and that's why he's not at war. I wondered that when we were watching it. I was like, why is he not? But he must get that a lot because he's clearly defensive about it throughout the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also took note of when the women are all trying to get a job at this factory and they're being shown how to do the riveting is what they're doing. And the guy that's training them, he said something about, oh, you'll get used to it. You women are used to repetitive tasks, just like ironing or baking. You'll get used to riveting too, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the men are all real grabby because it's in the 40s. There's no HR and they're all, they're like, oh, sweet, there's women here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Again, that's what like sort of really jumped out at me is like, I was like, wow, like this would make a really good series.
That's true. Well, you know what? Craig, Bomb Girls is the series. Have you seen it?
Oh, is it really?
It's literally that. It is literally this movie as a series.
Oh, wow.
And it's called Bomb
I'll have
Girls.
to look for that. Okay. Yeah.
It's quite good, actually. Yeah. But so, yeah, you saw it and they saw it and they made a series, like a recent one within the last 5 years, maybe. I took note also of the phrase, oh, balls, because I literally say that all of the time. And so I'm like, wow, I thought that was like an 80s thing, but it might, you know how things cycle?
Yeah, come back. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. By the way, this movie, I don't know if you put it in your notes or anything, but this movie is currently free to watch on YouTube Movies.
Thank you for bringing that up. So those of you who are listening to this and haven't seen it, which I bet most of you haven't, check it out. It's free on YouTube Movies.
Yeah, it's wild how like YouTube Movies is, like anytime I used to watch a movie on YouTube, it would be like some like rogue uploader who would upload a movie that like you couldn't find anywhere else. But like now, like legitimately, YouTube Movies is a channel within YouTube and they have a lot of really, really good stuff because the first thing I thought when you gave me the list of movies to consider, I was like, well, if I can find a way to watch Swing Shift, and then I was like, oh, there's a super easy way to watch Swing Shift. It's like, I don't even have to pay $3.99 to watch it or sign up for a free trial to somewhere or anything like that. So yeah, I love when stuff is like on YouTube Movies. Like I legitimately think that like you could spend nothing but the cost of your internet and have a pretty good at-home viewing experience between Tubi, Pluto TV, YouTube Movies, like without having to spend any money on subscriptions. You'd always have something to watch.
That is true. The only caveat is you have to watch commercials.
Yeah. Well, YouTube Movies, you don't. But
I did.
Oh, you know what?
Do you have a premium?
I have YouTube Premium. Yeah. I totally forgot about that. Oh, wow. Okay. The cool thing about YouTube Premium, though, is my wife hates watching ads. So that's why we got it. But you also get YouTube Music for free with that, which it's just like Spotify, but it's YouTube Music. So like I never use Spotify anymore. I mean, not to get into a whole discussion about the shitty pay rates that all the streamers give people, but like YouTube Music actually, if you listen to a song on YouTube Music, more money is going to go to the artist quicker than it would if you listened on Spotify.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah.
Very good to know. A couple questions for you. So it seems like in some instances they take care to hide the affair from the public eye.
Oh yeah.
And in others they don't. So I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was that one sequence where I think is it like right before or right after they get together where she sees like her landlord and she rushes out.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's a few scenes like that. And then they're at a dance, kissing and very much together. So I didn't.
I think it was more like knowing if they were going to be somewhere where they would see somebody they knew or that she knew as from her past life, if you will.
Speaking of the landlady, did you know that, is it Ethel? Is that her name? It's like Spike and Ethel. It's her mom. That's Goldie's mom.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that.
You wouldn't know it. I mean,
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's Goldie's mom, huh? Yeah.
Wow. Oh,
Mhm.
that's a cool little bit of trivia.
Yes. How would you handle I always get nervous, but it's like we see them celebrating, the three of them, Christine Lochte, Goldie Hawn, and Kurt Russell, celebrating Kurt's birthday, or Lucky's birthday. They're
Mhm.
having a great time, and we see Ed Harris's character pull up, so it builds that stress factor for us. And I took note of how she handled the situation, how Kay handled that situation. I was curious what you thought of it and how you would handle a situation in a similar situation. Hey, Craig, if you're cheating on your wife and your wife comes home, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I don't think I could really speak to what I would personally do. But yeah, again, I thought that was like a really well written and well performed scene, because even like the way Christine Lottie's character like casually sort of,
Steps over
answers
to
the door.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there was like a little bit of a dance going on there, right? Between Goldie and Ed Harris's character. Like, yeah, I don't remember formulating too much of an opinion or an idea in my head. So that's definitely something that I might need to do a third rewatch of this film.
Well, she clearly, without saying so, it's sort of like everybody knows. She just goes over and is with Ed now, and it's like Christine sort of pretends she's with.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, they buddy up, yeah.
And then that's it. Like then Lucky just knows, and then spoiler alert, you guys, Christine Lotte's character. I hate when I do this. If it's a movie I haven't only seen once, I always forget the actual characters' names.
Yeah.
Hazel and Lucky end up sleeping together. So that obviously causes a major rift in the girlfriend friendship until the end.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and they have a whore out. The fight scene. I forgot about that. At first they make up and it's very over tea and it's prim and proper and it's like, that was way too easy. And then Goldie gets drunk and calls her a whore.
Yeah.
And then Christine, she's like, me? You're the one.
You're the one that's married.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. I call it a whore off because anyway.
Yeah. And it's PG rated movie.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah, we talked about the towel scene at the beginning when you can see Ed Harris's business. I love Ed Harris too. We didn't get enough of him in this movie. I think that's maybe one of my complaints. I really like him as an actor.
Yeah. Well, it's wild too, because again, Ed Harris was probably like, he did the right stuff. But yeah, it's funny when you see an actor that went on to be like a very prominent actor in what's considered a smaller role. And it seems weird, but in 1984, it probably wasn't weird. Yeah, again, I was able to watch this movie without like huffing and puffing. I was able to watch it 2 times in a 24-hour period. Aside from wanting to go back and seeing that dynamic in the scene we just talked about, I mean, I don't think I'll ever have a huge craving to watch this movie again. But it's a movie I'm glad we sat down and talked about, and that's one of the great things I sort of love about the 2 episodes we've done together now on this podcast is like, I either get to talk about a movie that I think a lot of people haven't seen, or I get to talk about a movie that I haven't seen. And now we've done that. We've done that twice,
Yeah, the best of times, you guys. Check out the other episode Craig joined me for.
What a fun movie. What a fun episode.
Yeah, you picked some good ones. Just a few other bits of trivia before we wrap up. I'm a big fan of Viggo Mortensen, so I found this interesting. Apparently, there was a deleted scene with him in it.
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
Super young, probably.
Yeah. I'm not sure in what capacity, but it was a scene with Goldie Hawn.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And there are 3 Oscar winners in this film: Goldie Hawn, Holly Hunter, and Christine Lochte. Yeah. And Ed Harris was nominated for an Oscar. I'm not sure which role that was for. And then I love reading about who they maybe wanted to cast or people who turned it down, kind of casting what ifs. So for the role of Lucky, played by Kurt, apparently Kevin Costner was the first choice,
Oh, wow.
but he was
Well, and
unavailable.
yeah, well, it's understandable too because Kevin Costner wasn't Kevin Costner yet. And
Mhm.
to once again circle back to my Brian De Palma podcast is on the Untouchables episode I did with Ryan, we actually talked about De Palma was like really, really hesitant to use Kevin Costner, and he spoke to people that had worked with him prior, and they were like, "No, this guy's going to be a huge star. Like, get on the rocket ship now
Mhm.
while you still can." So, I'd imagine the Untouchables was what 87, so 84. Costner's like wasn't on anybody's radar. As
No, I
being
can't even think
like,
of what he had done in 80
no,
by this
yeah.
time.
Mhm.
And then I thought this was wild. Apparently, Bruce Springsteen was considered.
I saw that. Yeah,
What has he acted in anything
I don't
that you're
think
with?
so. But it's funny, him and Demi have a connection because Springsteen
Oh,
did Streets of Philadelphia
oh, that's
for
right. So
Philadelphia.
they must be
So
friends or something.
yeah, yeah. Um, it's kind of understandable because Bruce Springsteen was Bruce Springsteen in 1984, a
Yeah,
huge star.
huge.
He's musical, so there would have been the musical component to it as well. Funnily enough, his sister, I don't know if they're full blood or if it's a half sister thing, but his sister Pamela starred in the sequel to Sleepaway Camp, Sleepaway Camp 2 and Sleepaway Camp 3, which are like below B grade horror films.
Yeah, sounds like it.
But yeah, it was Bruce Springsteen, Pamela Springsteen. She's in those movies,
Oh,
which is kind of wild. But yeah, I remember reading Bruce Springsteen was considered, and I wonder how close that actually came to be. And there's actually a De Palma Springsteen connection as well. Brian De Palma directed the video for Dancing in the Dark with Courtney Love or
Cox.
Courtney Cox.
yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a 6 degrees of separation situation always.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Another Silkwood reference is that movie had been like tried to be made, like a decade earlier. It came out, I think it was 83.
Mhm.
And there was an original script for Jane Fonda.
Okay. Yeah.
Same here. The film was originally written as a vehicle of Jane Fonda
Oh, wow.
for Swing Shift, but when her agent turned it down and Goldie Hawn replaced her, they actually partially rewrote it so it would be more comical for
Yeah.
Goldie playing
Wow.
playing
That's
the part.
wild.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Before we wrap up, I want to hear where we can find all your work, but do you have any final closing thoughts about Swing Shift that you want to share?
No, well, first I want to thank you again for considering me. Anytime I'm invited on a podcast, I take it as a huge compliment
Well,
that
thank you
somebody
for
would want
joining
to.
me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Again, thank you for inviting me. And again, the main thing I really took away from this movie is like Swing Shift isn't a movie I would have thought about watching. Not a movie I loved, not a movie I hated, but a movie I'm glad I sat down to watch again.
Mhm.
And if you're inspired at all based on this discussion to sit down and watch it, I think there's way worse ways you can, spend an hour and 40 minutes of your time. In terms of like my projects and things like that, for the most recent thing, you can go to the goatdepalma.blogspot.com is my podcast page. Within that page, there is a link to all my other stuff. But again, for your show notes, I'll give you like my flow page
Okay.
link that lists everything. It's got all my podcasts. It's got my music. It's got some video projects I've done. Anything that I've officially sort of put out in the world on the internet is there. And if you do check out any of it, thank you in advance. I do appreciate it.
That's awesome. You're very talented, multi-talented guy over here. So yeah, thanks
I try.
again for joining me for this lesser known Kurt Russell film. I very much loved the 40s fashion of it all. I found Kurt to be extremely easy on the eyes in this particular role, but we do have to now return to the present day reality. And hey, you guys listening, if you like what you hear and you're not subscribed, why not? Please do that. Also do the same thing over on YouTube. And until next time, be kind, rewind.